Okay, so now that we know a little bit about Visual Studio, and if you skip that video, that's fine. Um, this video we're going to go over Visual Studio Code, or VS Code, some like to call it. Um, it's very uh, it's a very good utility to use because it can be used for a multitude of things. So as you can see already, the the user interface of Visual Studio Code is very dumbed down. I don't know if I'd like to say dumbed down, but it's very streamlined. There's not a lot of stuff on Visual Studio Code. If you remember the Visual Studio video, there's all kinds of windows open. There's your Solution Explorer, there's Team Explorer. You can move all those windows around. There's a way to run the application, which really isn't here that you can see quite yet. It was just really busy. The UI is really busy in Visual Studio. And it's for a good cause, because Visual Studio can do a lot of things right out of the box. You just download Visual Studio, and there's templates for you to use to run your application, and all kinds of good stuff from Visual Studio. So Visual Studio is awesome. Visual Studio Code is a lot more streamlined. It's a lot more simple. Some people like to call it a glorified text editor because essentially all you're doing is editing text, but it is a lot more than that in my opinion. So if you see over here on the left-hand side is your Explorer, so it's kind of like your Solution Explorer, except in Visual Studio Code, you're really not exploring your solution. You're really exploring a folder that you have open in Visual Studio Code. So if you'll go, and what I mean by that is if you go to the top of the screen and hit File, all you can do is open folders. You can't open a solution like you can in Visual Studio. So, and then when you open that folder, it'll know that it's a Visual Studio file because it'll actually put some VS Code files in there to tell it what kind of application it is. So, since I can't open the application, can I make a new application? And see, you really can't do that in Visual Studio Code either. There is not an option for file new anything. So you actually have to do that with the command line. And then you have to use the templates that are given to you from Microsoft. So if we go here, I can do the .NET CLI, or the .NET command line interface, and that tells you exactly the templates and what you need to put for all of the stuff you'll use in Visual Studio Code. So all of the basic commands that we'll need to make our new templates, to modify existing applications, so if we wanted to add a package or add a reference, if we wanted to add NuGet packages. So you'll see here .NET New Console if we want to make a new console application in .NET Core. Custom templates. I thought somewhere on here it gave us all of the inputs. It was under reference, .NET Build, Clean. So you can see you can do all of this stuff with the .NET CLI that we could do in Visual Studio with the user interface. It just, you have to do it with the command line now because it offers so many different types of environments that we have to use the command line for a lot of the things that we want to do. So if we come here to Visual Studio Code, you can see that we have extensions. So there's an extension for just about everything you can think of. So I have an extension for C#, so I can use C# in Visual Studio Code. I have an extension for Git, so I can have version control in my Visual Studio Code. I have an extension for Python, that way I can use Python in my Visual Studio Code. And you can search extensions for just about everything. So let's search Java. And notice here there's a Java extension pack. So any kind of development you want to do, just about any kind of development can be done here in Visual Studio Code, and it's cross-platform. See if there's a Go. So yeah, there's a rich Go for Visual Studio Code, which is a programming language developed by Google. So Go team at Google. So it's very utilitarian, and by that I mean you can do a lot of different things with Visual Studio Code. It's great. So here's Git Lens, which shows you your Git repository that you might have, which I'll cover in another video. On the left-hand side, you can also run your application. So right now, it's not highlighted because there's currently not an application with a launch file here, so it doesn't really know how to run it right now. So let's go ahead and let's go to the command line and make a new web application. So the first thing I'm going to do is select Run. So I'm going to type in Windows Run, and that brings me to this Run prompt. And I'm going to go ahead and type CMD to get me to a command prompt. And now notice it brings me to users and my username, or my 6+2. So that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and stay there. I'm going to click directory to see if there's anything good that I might be able to put this in, or maybe if I want to make a new directory. Yeah, I want to make a new directory and say, I'm going to call this Core Apps. So now I can change directory into Core Apps. And now I can put all of my applications here that I want to make. So instead of having a user interface, I just have this command line interface. And then from there, I can use the .NET keyword to know that I want to make a new .NET application, or I want to use the .NET command line interface, or .NET CLI. I'm going to say .NET new, and I believe it's MVC. Let me go back here just to make sure it is MVC before I hit enter. New. What can I use for .NET new? So notice all the different things here. It's impossible to remember everything. So that's why you just come here with whatever you're going to do. So here's a model view controller, the same one we made in Visual Studio. And the keyword for that is MVC. So, and that's good for both C# and F#. So let's go back, .NET new MVC, and let's hit enter. Am I doing anything? .NET new MVC. There it goes. Okay. Now notice it's doing a lot of things. It's restoring our application. It's making all of the files and folders for us. And now if we come back, I'm in Core Apps. So now if I do a directory and see what's in that directory, now we're seeing everything that was in Visual Studio. So now I can simply type, now that I see all of the folders that I want to work with, I can type code with a period, so code space period, and from there if I hit enter, it'll actually bring up that application in Visual Studio Code. So now here in the Explorer on the left hand side, we can see all of those files that I worked with earlier. Here's the startup file, and notice how fast it was. It was very fast coming up. It wasn't like Visual Studio that came up with a bunch of prompts and asking you what you wanted to do, asking you if you wanted to open something. Notice it's doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes in the output, like downloading a bunch of packages. It notices that my packages are out of date, so it downloads them for me. And if you're observant, you can actually see, it looks like it's still actually downloading packages. Yes, let's download the required assets to build. And wait a couple more seconds. And you can also see in this VS Code, it actually made a couple files for us. It noticed we were working with a .NET Core application, and it noticed it's a web app, and it gives us the tasks that it needs for Visual Studio or for VS Code to run this locally. So now if I go back to run, I actually have the option to run this now with those files that it made for me. So sometimes it might require a little bit more to run. Let's see if it did all of the things to run successfully. Okay, let's go to advanced, let's proceed. And now it looks like it's a little bit different template than the one that's in Visual Studio, but it brought us to our home page. Home, privacy. So, and that's probably because the template that is in the .NET CLI is a little bit different than the template that's in Visual Studio Edition. So let's look at that view to see if I'm right. And notice even though I exited out of it, the program is still running, so I'm going to go ahead and exit out of that. Come back here, and let's go to the Views, Home, Index. And yeah, it's a lot simpler of a view, so the template's probably different between the .NET CLI and Visual Studio. But it has all of the same folders, controllers, models, views. So we have our MVC structure in Visual Studio Code. So whichever one you'd like, if you'd like a more faster, streamlined approach that might require a little bit more work here and there, Visual Studio Code is great. If you want to be able to just use one IDE, no matter what you're working with, whether it be Python or Java, .NET, Visual Studio Code is great. If you're still beginning and learning and you want Visual Studio to kind of hold your hand a little bit, there's nothing wrong with that. Visual Studio is good for you, and you can download that for free off the internet. Just know that it's going to be a little bit slower loading in your applications and stuff like that. So download one of them, download both of them, mess with them. It doesn't matter which one you use, as long as you turn in your programs the same way. It doesn't matter to me. If you have any questions about which one's right for you, you can email me and we can talk about it. Or you can just download both of them and mess with them. So I hope this helps with Visual Studio Code. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.